The morning it all began was deceptively ordinary. Spring sunshine filtered through the dogwood trees that lined Oak Ridge Estates, one of southern Georgia's most prestigious communities. The white delivery truck pulled up to the entrance, its engine humming quietly against the backdrop of chirping birds and automatic sprinklers. Marcus Richardson adjusted his uniform one last time before stepping out. At 58, his movements were deliberate, his posture impeccable despite the decades spent lifting boxes and navigating delivery routes. The small logo on his breast pocket read, "Richardson Logistics," a detail most people never noticed or questioned. They saw only what they expected to see, a delivery man, nothing more. As he lifted the medium-sized package from the truck, Marcus felt the familiar weight of eyes watching him. This wasn't his first delivery to Oak Ridge Estates, but something in the air felt different today. Perhaps it was the way Mrs. Harrington from 143 Magnolia Lane abruptly stopped watering her prized roses to track his movements. Or how Mr. Peterson, the retired banker who always greeted Marcus with a curt nod, now stood on his porch with arms crossed, phone casually pointed in Marcus's direction. Marcus took a deep breath, inhaling the sweet scent of dogwood blossoms mingled with freshly cut grass. The package was for 156 Oak Ridge Circle, Dr. Eleanor Williams, a new resident. He checked the delivery instructions one more time, leave on front porch, no signature required. He had barely made it halfway up the curved driveway when 3 residents emerged from neighboring houses, phones raised. Marcus recognized them from previous deliveries. Mr. Peterson, Mr. Collins from the Homeowners Association, and Mrs. Thompson, who once complained that Marcus had parked his truck too visibly in front of her home. "Well, well, look who's back," Mr. Collins called out, his voice carrying across the manicured lawns. "You sure you got the right address this time? This isn't exactly your usual neighborhood, is it?" Marcus kept walking, his face a carefully composed mask of professionalism. 15 years running his own logistics company had taught him that some battles weren't worth fighting. But the comments continued, each one more pointed than the last. "Hey buddy, you need directions? The service entrance is around back," Mr. Peterson chuckled, making no attempt to lower his voice. "Margaret, you getting this? Wait till the others see." Marcus placed the package carefully on Dr. Williams's porch, positioned it away from the edges where rain might reach it, and turned to leave. The phone cameras followed his every move. "What's in the box anyway? Must be something fancy," Mrs. Thompson called out, her tone dripping with insinuation. "Hope nothing goes missing around here." Marcus felt a familiar tightness in his chest, a burning sensation that crawled up his throat. He'd built his company from nothing after 20 years as an employee, secured contracts with major carriers, trained dozens of drivers, some of whom now owned their own trucks. Yet here, in this pristine bubble of privilege, none of that existed. He walked back to his truck with measured steps, aware that running would validate their suspicion, while responding would escalate the situation. The gravel crunched beneath his boots, each step a small exercise in restraint. What none of them saw was Jamal, Marcus's newest driver, crouched behind the truck, his own phone recording everything. Nor could they see the tremor in Marcus's hands as he started the engine, or the way his wedding ring clinked against the steering wheel as his grip tightened. "Not today," he whispered to himself. "Not anymore." If you're someone who believes in standing up for what's right even when it's difficult, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe. Stories of dignity and courage like this one deserve to be shared. Behind the pristine facade of Oak Ridge Estates, a different story was unfolding in the modest but comfortable home of Dr. Eleanor Williams. At 63, Eleanor had spent decades building her reputation as one of Atlanta's most respected pediatric surgeons. Now semi-retired, she had chosen Oak Ridge for its quietude, a place to write her memoirs and occasionally consult at the regional hospital. Eleanor's living room walls were adorned with photographs. Medical school graduation, humanitarian missions to Honduras and Haiti, and countless images with children she had treated. Among them stood a black and white photograph of her grandmother in a maid's uniform, standing proudly despite the circumstances of her time. When the doorbell camera notification chimed, Eleanor glanced at her phone screen in time to witness the tail end of the confrontation. Her fingers, still nimble from years of delicate surgical work, gripped the phone tighter as she watched. "Same old Oak Ridge," she muttered, shaking her head. She had been warned about the community's traditional values when she purchased the house, a polite euphemism she recognized immediately. As one of only 3 black homeowners in the sprawling development, Eleanor had expected some adjustment period. What she hadn't expected was to witness such blatant behavior in 2023. She opened her front door, retrieved the package, medical journals she'd ordered, and scanned the street. The white delivery truck was gone, but the neighbors remained, clustered in a small group, still talking. Eleanor made direct eye contact with Mrs. Thompson, held her gaze until the woman looked away, then closed her door without a word. Inside, Eleanor placed the package on her kitchen counter, her hands smoothing over the label. Richardson Logistics, she read aloud, making a mental note of the company name. Something stirred in her memory, a mention in a community business award ceremony she'd attended last year. The owner had given a speech, something about perseverance and opportunity. The morning light streamed through Eleanor's kitchen window, catching the dust motes in its beam and illuminating the gentle lines on her hands. Hands that had saved lives, hands that had fought their own battles in hospital boardrooms and operating theaters where she had often been the only black woman. The familiar weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders, the unspoken obligation to speak up, to stand against the casual cruelties that others could ignore. Eleanor's house smelled of fresh coffee and the lavender she grew in small pots along her windowsill. The scent had always calmed her before difficult surgeries, and it calmed her now as she reached for her phone. The Homeowners Association would be receiving an email today, and she would be saving that doorbell footage. Some battles were worth fighting, especially when others couldn't. Across town, in a converted warehouse that served as the headquarters for Richardson Logistics, Marcus sat in his modest office. The walls were a warm terracotta color that his late wife Diane had insisted would bring energy to the workspace. Photographs of their 3 children at various ages decorated one wall, alongside framed contracts with major carriers and the business license he'd obtained 20 years ago. The desk was solid oak, worn smooth from years of use. It had been his father's desk, salvaged from the school where he'd worked as a janitor for 30 years. Good enough for planning a future, his father had said when gifting it to Marcus. Good enough for building one too. Marcus ran his hand over the smooth surface, feeling the groove worn into the right side where his father's arm had rested for decades. The smell of pine cleaner and coffee filled the space, creating the familiar scent of weekday mornings. Outside his office window, the warehouse buzzed with activity. Packages being sorted, drivers checking routes, the soft beeping of forklifts backing up. Jamal knocked on the open door, his expression somber. At 26, he was one of Marcus's newest hires, still eager to prove himself. "Got it all, Mr. Richardson," he said, holding up his phone. "Clear as day." Marcus nodded, the knot in his stomach tightening. "Send it to me." "And Jamal," he hesitated. "Thank you, but you didn't need to do that." "Yes, sir, I did," Jamal replied, his voice firm despite his youth. "My mother raised me better than to stand by and say nothing." As Jamal left, Marcus opened his email to find a message already waiting from their contract supervisor at National Parcel Services, the major carrier that outsourced last-mile deliveries to companies like his. The subject line read, "Quarterly Review, Oak Ridge Estates Route." The timing was either terrible luck or something worse. Marcus clicked the email open, his heart pounding against his ribs loud enough that he could hear it in his ears. Quarterly Performance Review scheduled for Oak Ridge Estates Route. Client Satisfaction Survey results indicate concerns. Meeting requested with Regional Manager Simon Wells next Tuesday, 10 a.m. Marcus leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking beneath him. The Oak Ridge Estates contract represented nearly 15% of his company's revenue. 15% that paid for health insurance for his employees, college funds for his grandchildren, and the expansion he'd been planning for the warehouse. Through his office window, he could see the team he'd built, diverse in age, background, and ethnicity. People who depended on him, who had trusted his vision. The responsibility sat heavy on his shoulders. His computer pinged with an incoming video from Jamal. Marcus pressed play and watched himself through the neighbor's eyes. An intruder, a threat, someone who didn't belong. "Not anymore," he repeated to his empty office, the words hanging in the air like a promise. Have you ever been judged unfairly based on appearances alone? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might help others feel less alone in similar situations. The weekend arrived with a weight that pressed down on Marcus's chest, making even the simplest tasks feel exhausting. He sat at his kitchen table, morning light streaming through thin curtains, casting long shadows across the worn wooden surface. The house was quiet without Diane, 3 years gone from cancer, but her absence still echoed in every room. His coffee had grown cold, forgotten as he reviewed the video for what must have been the 20th time. Each viewing revealed new details: the way Mr. Collins nudged Mr. Peterson just before making his first comment, the passing dog walker who hurried past with averted eyes, the curtain in Dr. Williams's window that moved slightly, suggesting a witness. Marcus's hands, strong from decades of physical work yet somehow more vulnerable in the morning light, trembled slightly as he set down his phone. His wedding ring caught the sunlight, the gold band slightly dented from years of wear, much like Marcus himself. The kitchen smelled of toast and coffee, the lingering scent of normalcy that felt increasingly distant. Outside, birds chirped in the old oak tree that dominated his modest backyard. The same tree where he'd built a swing for his children, where he'd later pushed his grandchildren. A constant in a world that seemed determined to remind him of his place in it. The phone rang, startling him from his thoughts. It was Lydia, his daughter. "Dad, you sound tired," she said, concern evident in her voice. At 34, Lydia was the middle child but had always been the family's emotional compass. "Just working through some business things," he replied, trying to keep his tone light. "On Saturday morning? Must be important." The silence stretched between them, filled with unasked questions. "Dad, what's really going on?" "The dam broke." Marcus found himself describing the incident, the video, the upcoming review, all of it spilling out in a torrent of words that surprised even him. He hadn't realized how much he'd been holding in. "Send me the video," Lydia said when he finished, her voice tight with controlled anger. As a corporate attorney for a tech firm in Atlanta, she had dealt with her share of discrimination cases. "It's not that simple, Lydia. The contract. Send me the video, Dad. This isn't just about a contract. This is about dignity." Dignity. The word resonated in the quiet kitchen, stirring something deep within Marcus. He thought of his father, who had cleaned school corridors with the same pride others brought to corner offices. Who had taught Marcus that work, any honest work, carried inherent dignity. "I'll send it," he said finally. "But this is my battle to fight." "No, Dad," Lydia replied softly. "That's what they want you to think. That you're alone. But you've never been alone." After the call ended, Marcus sat in the sunlit kitchen for a long time, watching dust motes dance in the beams of light. The house settled around him with familiar creaks and sighs, as if reminding him of its presence, its solidarity. Finally, he picked up his phone and forwarded the video to Lydia. Then, breaking his usual Saturday routine, he changed into his company polo shirt, navy blue with Richardson Logistics, embroidered in silver thread, and headed to the office. The warehouse was quiet on weekends, with only a skeleton crew handling urgent deliveries. Marcus nodded to the few employees present and retreated to his office. He had work to do. Opening his computer, he began drafting an email to Simon Wells, the regional manager at National Parcel Services. He typed, deleted, and retyped the opening paragraph several times. How do you put into words a lifetime of swallowed insults and maintained composure? How do you explain that this wasn't an isolated incident, but the latest in a pattern so familiar it had become almost expected? The cursor blinked accusingly on the screen. Marcus rubbed his eyes, feeling every one of his 58 years. His office, usually a sanctuary of control and order, felt suddenly confining. The framed achievements on the walls seemed to mock him with their official language and empty promises of equality. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Carlos, one of his longest-serving drivers. "Mr. Richardson, didn't expect to see you today," Carlos said, surprise evident in his voice. At 45, Carlos had been with the company for nearly 15 years, starting when it was just Marcus and 2 rented trucks. "Just catching up on some paperwork," Marcus replied, gesturing vaguely at his computer. Carlos hesitated in the doorway, his keys jingling softly in his hand. "Jamal told me what happened. At that fancy neighborhood." Marcus felt a flash of annoyance, quickly replaced by resignation. Of course Jamal had talked. The younger generation didn't understand the value of discretion, of handling things quietly. "It's being handled," Marcus said firmly. "That's what my father always said too," Carlos replied, leaning against the doorframe. "Every time it happened to him. It's being handled." Until one day, he couldn't handle it anymore. He paused, the keys in his hand suddenly still. He lost himself trying to be what they wanted. "Don't make the same mistake, Mr. Richardson." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Marcus nodded slowly, acknowledging the wisdom without committing to it. After Carlos left, Marcus turned back to his computer. The blank email still waited, the cursor still blinking. But now, instead of typing to Simon Wells, he opened a new document and began drafting something different entirely. By Sunday evening, when Marcus finally returned home, his printer had spit out dozens of pages. Data on delivery efficiency, customer satisfaction ratings, driver safety records, and comparative cost analyses. Facts and figures that told one story. Richardson Logistics wasn't just good at what they did, they were exceptional. If you're finding value in this journey of courage and determination, please take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe. Your support helps share these important stories with others who might need to hear them. Monday morning arrived with the oppressive humidity that signaled an approaching storm. The air hung thick and heavy, making breathing feel like work and movement an effort in slow motion. Marcus dressed with particular care, a crisp button-down shirt beneath his company jacket, pressed slacks instead of his usual work pants, his good leather shoes polished to a shine. The warehouse was already humming with activity when he arrived. Packages moved along the sorting belt, drivers checked their routes, the usual organized chaos of morning dispatch. Marcus moved through it all with purpose, stopping occasionally to answer questions or provide guidance. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from Lydia, spoke with a colleague in employment law. "Call me when you can." Before he could respond, another message appeared, this one from an unknown number, "Dr. Eleanor Williams here. I believe we need to talk about what happened at Oak Ridge on Friday. Please call at your convenience." Marcus stared at the message, trying to place the name. Then it clicked, the new resident, the package recipient. How had she gotten his personal number? As if in answer to his unspoken question, a third message appeared from the same unknown number. "I saved your company information from the package label. Apologies for the direct contact." Marcus felt a strange mixture of concern and curiosity. He stepped into his office for privacy and dialed the number. "Dr. Williams? This is Marcus Richardson returning your call." "Mr. Richardson, thank you for getting back to me so quickly." Her voice was warm but precise, each word delivered with careful intention. "I witnessed what happened on Friday from my security camera. I wanted you to know I've already filed a formal complaint with the Homeowners Association." Marcus's grip on the phone tightened. "That's appreciated, Dr. Williams, but not necessary." "Yes, I suspected you might say that." There was a pause, the sound of papers shuffling. "Mr. Richardson, I did some research over the weekend. Richardson Logistics has won the Chamber of Commerce Small Business Award twice in the past decade. You personally were recognized with the Community Leadership Award last year for your mentorship program." "You've been thorough," Marcus said, unsure where this was headed. "I'm a surgeon. Thoroughness keeps people alive." Another pause. "I also know that Simon Wells, the regional manager at National Parcel Services, plays golf every Thursday with James Collins, the president of our Homeowners Association." The information hit Marcus like a physical blow. The connection explained the timing of the performance review email, the sudden scrutiny. "How do you, Mr. Richardson? I may be new to Oak Ridge, but I've navigated spaces like this my entire career. Nothing happens in isolation." Her voice softened slightly. "I have a proposition for you. I sit on the board of the Regional Business Alliance. We're launching a supplier diversity initiative next month. I'd like Richardson Logistics to be featured as a success story." The offer hung between them, its implications clear. Visibility, protection, legitimacy in circles that had previously been closed. "Why would you do this?" Marcus asked finally, the question emerging before he could filter it. "Because 20 years ago, someone did something similar for me when I was the only black woman in my surgical residency program." Her tone was matter-of-fact, free of sentimentality. "We move forward by extending our hands backward." After ending the call, Marcus sat at his desk, turning the conversation over in his mind. Dr. Williams's offer was generous, potentially game-changing. But it also felt like a detour, a way around rather than through the immediate problem. His office door opened without a knock. Only one person in the company would enter that way. Margaret Chen, his operations manager for the past decade, walked in with the confidence of someone who had earned her place many times over. "You're brooding," she stated, setting a cup of coffee on his desk. "I can see it on your face. What happened?" At 62, Margaret had joined Richardson Logistics after 30 years in corporate logistics management, her hair already streaked with silver and her patience for corporate politics long exhausted. She had once told Marcus that working for his company was the only job that lets me actually sleep at night. Marcus hesitated, then shared both Jamal's video and Dr. Williams's offer. Margaret watched and listened in silence, her expression giving away nothing. "So," she said when he finished, "you have options. The question is, which Marcus Richardson makes this decision? The businessman who has built everything from nothing? Or the delivery driver who still remembers every slight, every door closed in his face?" "They're the same person," Marcus replied, a defensive edge creeping into his voice. "No," Margaret said firmly. "They're not. One looks backward at what was taken. The other looks forward at what can be built." She took a sip of her coffee, grimaced at the temperature, and set it down. "And right now, you need to decide which one signs the emails and makes the calls." The office fell silent except for the muffled sounds of the warehouse beyond the door. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, a warning of the approaching storm. Inside, Marcus felt something shift, a clarity emerging from the fog of doubt and anger. "I need to make some calls," he said finally. Margaret nodded, satisfied. "Yes, you do. Starting with HR at National Parcel Services. Simon Wells has a boss too, you know." As Margaret left, closing the door behind her, Marcus opened his desk drawer and removed a small worn leather notebook. Inside were names and numbers collected over 20 years in business, contacts, mentors, allies. People who owed favors and people to whom he owed his success. It was time to call them all. Have you ever had to choose between taking the high road or standing your ground? What influenced your decision? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Tuesday morning arrived with a clarity that follows a night of storms. The air felt washed clean, the sunlight sharper, colors more vibrant. Marcus woke before his alarm, the burden of decision lifted from his shoulders. The path forward was clear now, not easy, but clear. He dressed with deliberate care, choosing his best suit, the one reserved for bank meetings and client pitches. Navy blue wool with a subtle pinstripe, tailored to his frame. The tie Diane had given him on their last anniversary together. Deep burgundy with a pattern so subtle it was nearly invisible. His father's cufflinks, worn smooth from decades of use. In the bathroom mirror, Marcus studied his reflection. Gray threaded through his close-cropped hair, lines mapped his face, evidence of a life fully lived, with its share of joys and sorrows. His eyes, though, held something new today. A certainty. A purpose. "Today we stop delivering packages," he told his reflection, "and start delivering consequences." The drive to National Parcel Services regional headquarters took 45 minutes, the familiar landscape of southern Georgia rolling past his window. Fields where cotton once grew now hosted distribution centers and technology parks. Progress layered upon history, neither fully erasing the other. The NPS building rose 12 stories of glass and steel, a monument to corporate efficiency. Marcus had been there many times over the years, but always to the lower floors where contractors and vendors were received. Today, he had an appointment on the 10th floor, executive territory. The security guard at the desk, a young man with a military bearing, checked Marcus's ID and visitor pass carefully. "Richardson Logistics, huh?" he said, handing back the ID. "You guys delivered to my mom last week. She said your driver helped her bring the packages inside. Told me to order from that company again." Marcus smiled, genuinely touched. "That's good to hear. What's your mother's name? I'll pass along the compliment to the driver." "Evelyn Nichols, over on Westbrook Avenue." Marcus made a mental note. That would be Terrence's route. "I'll let him know." The small interaction steadied him as he rode the elevator upward, a reminder of why he had built his company the way he had, with care, with attention to the human details that corporations like NPS often overlooked. The 10th floor was hushed, the carpet thick enough to swallow footsteps. Marcus was led to a conference room where 3 people already waited: Patricia Dawson, VP of Operations; Robert Chen, no relation to Margaret; Chief Diversity Officer, and Amanda Harris, Legal Counsel. Conspicuously absent was Simon Wells, the regional manager who had scheduled the original review. Patricia stood as Marcus entered, extending her hand. "Mr. Richardson, thank you for coming in on such short notice." "The urgency seemed mutual," Marcus replied, taking the offered seat across from them. The leather chair was comfortable, designed to put visitors at ease. Marcus sat straight, declining its invitation to relax. Patricia glanced at her colleagues before continuing. "We've reviewed the materials you sent over yesterday, along with some additional information that came to light." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "It appears there may have been some irregularities in how your company's performance metrics were being evaluated for the Oak Ridge Estates route." "Irregularities," Marcus repeated, letting the corporate euphemism hang in the air. "Is that what we're calling targeted harassment and potential contract discrimination now?" Amanda Harris leaned forward slightly, her legal training evident in her measured response. "Mr. Richardson, we want to assure you that National Parcel Services takes these allegations very seriously. That's why we've initiated an immediate internal investigation. Simon Wells has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome." The victory felt hollow, a corporate response to a human problem. Marcus opened his briefcase and removed a folder containing printouts of Jamal's video screenshots, annotated with dates, times, and names. "This isn't about Simon Wells," he said, sliding the folder across the table. "This is about a pattern of behavior that's been tolerated and enabled. My drivers have been documenting incidents at Oak Ridge Estates for over a year. I've brought these concerns to NPS 3 times. Each time, they were dismissed as misunderstandings or isolated incidents." Robert Chen, who had been quietly observing until now, opened the folder and spread the contents before his colleagues. His expression remained neutral, but his eyes betrayed a flash of recognition, the weary acknowledgement of one who has seen this story play out before. "Mr. Richardson," he said finally, "speaking candidly, what outcome are you seeking here?" The question was direct, stripped of corporate niceties. It deserved an equally direct answer. "3 things," Marcus replied, his voice steady. "First, a formal review of all diversity suppliers' performance metrics to ensure they're being evaluated fairly. Second, mandatory bias training for all regional managers who interface with contractors. And third," he paused, making eye contact with each person at the table, "I want Richardson Logistics removed from the Oak Ridge Estates route, effective immediately." The third request clearly surprised them. Patricia frowned slightly. "Mr. Richardson, that route represents a significant portion of your contract with us. Are you sure that's what you want?" "What I want," Marcus said carefully, "is to run a company where my employees can do their jobs with dignity and respect. If that can't happen at Oak Ridge Estates, then we don't belong there." The meeting continued for another hour, details negotiated, alternatives proposed. Throughout it all, Marcus held firm to his 3 conditions. By the time he left the building, the spring sun was high overhead, warming his face as he walked to his car. His phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "How did it go?" Marcus typed a simple reply, "We're out of Oak Ridge. And they're out of excuses. If you believe in standing up for what's right, even when it costs you something, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support helps stories like this reach those who need to hear them most." The news traveled fast through Oak Ridge Estates. By Wednesday afternoon, an emergency meeting of the Homeowners Association had been called, ostensibly to discuss recent developments with parcel delivery services. The community center, a stately building with white columns and polished hardwood floors, quickly filled with concerned residents. James Collins, the association president, stood at the podium looking distinctly uncomfortable. Behind him, projected on a large screen, was an email from National Parcel Services explaining that due to restructuring of regional delivery routes, Oak Ridge Estates would be transitioning to a different service provider with a 2-week gap in premium delivery options. For a community accustomed to same-day delivery and white glove service, this was tantamount to catastrophe. "This is unacceptable," declared Mrs. Thompson, rising from her seat in the 3rd row. "My medication arrives by courier. What am I supposed to do for 2 weeks? My daughter's wedding gifts are being delivered daily," added another resident. "Are you telling me guests will have to drive here themselves now?" The complaints multiplied, each more entitled than the last, the room growing warm with indignation. Eleanor Williams sat quietly in the back row, observing the spectacle with clinical detachment. She noted how quickly inconvenience transformed into righteous anger, how rapidly blame was assigned to everyone except those responsible. James Collins raised his hands, calling for order. Please, please. I understand your concerns. We're working on solutions. The truth is, he hesitated, glancing nervously at the association's legal counsel who gave a subtle nod. The truth is, this situation arose from an incident last Friday involving certain residents and a delivery driver from Richardson Logistics. A murmur swept through the room. Mr. Peterson, sitting in the front row, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. What incident? Someone called out. Collins cleared his throat. There was an interaction that was recorded on video. The driver felt harassed, and the company has withdrawn their services. Well, that's ridiculous, Mrs. Thompson interjected. If they can't handle a little neighborhood banter, that's hardly our problem. Dr. Williams chose that moment to stand. The room quieted as she made her way to the front, her posture straight, her pace unhurried. As a new resident, few knew her background, but her bearing commanded respect. I witnessed this banter, as you call it, she said, her voice carrying clearly without raising it. My security camera captured the entire interaction. 3 residents surrounded a delivery man, made racially charged comments, filmed him without consent, and suggested he might be a thief. She paused, letting her words sink in. That's not banter. That's harassment. And in some jurisdictions, it could be considered much worse. The silence that followed was profound. Then, from the back of the room, a hesitant voice spoke up. Do you have this video? Yes, Dr. Williams replied simply. As does Richardson Logistics. As does National Parcel Services. As does the Regional Business Alliance, where I serve on the board. The implications hung in the air, heavy with potential consequences beyond mere delivery inconveniences. Social embarrassment. Professional repercussions. Public exposure. James Collins, perspiration now visible on his forehead, attempted to regain control of the meeting. I think we need to focus on solutions moving forward. Perhaps an apology. An apology won't restore our service, someone interrupted. Actually, Dr. Williams countered, it might be a start, but it would need to be more than words. It would need to be a commitment to change. As the meeting continued, the mood in the room gradually shifted. Initial outrage gave way to uncomfortable self-reflection for some, stubborn denial for others. By the time it concluded, a committee had been formed to draft a formal apology and propose a community action plan to address neighborhood inclusivity and respect. It was a small step, born more of convenience than conviction, but it was a step nonetheless. As residents filed out, Dr. Williams found herself approached by an elderly woman she hadn't met before. The woman's hands trembled slightly, age spots dotting her skin, but her blue eyes were clear and direct. I'm Martha Jenkins, she introduced herself. I've lived here for 30 years. She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. I was sitting on my porch when it happened. I saw it all, and I said nothing. Her voice cracked slightly. My grandson was visiting. He asked me afterward why those men were being mean to the delivery man. I had no good answer for him. Dr. Williams nodded, understanding the confession for what it was. The hardest thing, Martha continued, isn't recognizing when others do wrong. It's recognizing when we fail to do right. She straightened her shoulders slightly. I'm on the new committee. I can't change what I didn't do last Friday, but I can try to make sure it doesn't happen again. As Martha walked away, Dr. Williams took out her phone and composed a text to Marcus Richardson. Progress is happening. Slowly, but it's happening. Some hearts and minds are changing. Across town, in his warehouse office, Marcus read the message with mixed emotions. Change was good, necessary even. But it always came too late for those who had already been hurt. He turned his attention to the spreadsheets before him, route reassignments for his drivers, new contract proposals to replace the Oak Ridge revenue. The work of rebuilding, of moving forward. It was familiar territory for a man who had spent his life creating opportunities from obstacles. Have you ever witnessed someone being mistreated and regretted not speaking up? What would you do differently today? Share your reflections in the comments below. Thursday morning brought with it a different kind of storm. Marcus arrived at his office to find Margaret waiting, her expression a clear warning. "Simon Wells is in the reception area," she said without preamble. "He's demanding to see you." Marcus felt a surge of anger, quickly contained. Did he say why? Something about clearing the air and misunderstandings. "He looks desperate, Marcus." Marcus took a deep breath, straightening the papers on his desk in a small ritual of control. "Send him in. But stay close." Simon Wells entered like a man walking to his own execution, shoulders hunched, face pale, eyes darting nervously around the office. At 45, he had the soft physique of someone who spent his days behind a desk and his evenings at business dinners. His navy suit, usually immaculate, looked slept in. "Richardson," he began, foregoing pleasantries, "this has gone too far. I've been suspended pending investigation. My reputation is being questioned. All because of some misinterpreted comments at a delivery." Marcus gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit down, Simon." Wells sat, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Look, I'm here to offer an olive branch. Whatever you think happened, I'm sure we can work something out. The Oak Ridge contract is still yours if you want it." "If I want it," Marcus repeated, his tone deliberately neutral. "Yes. That's what I'm saying. This whole thing has been blown out of proportion. So a few residents were a little overfamiliar. That's just how they are. It wasn't personal." Marcus studied the man before him. The desperation, the inability to understand even now what had actually occurred. There was a time when this willful blindness would have infuriated him. Today, it merely reinforced his resolve. "Simon," he said calmly, "this isn't about the Oak Ridge contract anymore. This is about a pattern of behavior that you've enabled and encouraged. When my drivers reported harassment, you dismissed it. When I raised concerns about discriminatory treatment, you called it oversensitivity." "That's not fair," Wells protested. "I've always treated your company exactly the same as other contractors." "That's precisely the problem. When other contractors faced routine challenges, you helped them. When we faced harassment, you told us to handle it ourselves." Wells's face flushed. "So what do you want? Money? An apology?" The question was so predictable, so perfectly aligned with Wells's transactional view of the world, that Marcus almost laughed. Instead, he opened his desk drawer and removed a file. "What I want," he said, placing the file between them, "is for you to read these." Inside were dozens of incident reports, copies of every complaint his drivers had filed over the past 3 years. Each documented with dates, times, and descriptions. Each submitted to NPS. Each effectively ignored. "I don't have time for this," Wells said, making no move to open the file. "Make time," Marcus replied, his voice hardening for the first time. "Because tomorrow, the NPS investigation team will receive copies as well. As will the legal department. As will your boss's boss." The color drained from Wells's face. "You can't do that. It would end my career." "Your actions are ending your career, Simon. I'm just providing the documentation." The room fell silent except for the steady hum of the air conditioning and the distant sounds of the warehouse beyond the door. Wells stared at the file as if it might bite him, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. "What if," he began, then stopped, recalibrating. "What if I could make this right? Really right, not just the Oak Ridge contract? What would that look like?" It was the first genuine question Wells had asked, possibly in their entire professional relationship. Marcus considered it carefully. "It would look like accountability," he said finally. "Not just for the residents who harassed my driver, but for the system that protected them. It would look like change, not just in who delivers packages to Oak Ridge Estates, but in how Oak Ridge Estates treats the people who serve them." Wells nodded slowly, resignation replacing desperation in his posture. "And my job? That's not for me to decide. But I believe in second chances, Simon. I built my entire company on them." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "The question is whether you're willing to actually change, or just willing to say whatever keeps you employed." After Wells left, Clutching the file of complaints like a lifeline, Margaret reappeared with 2 cups of coffee. "That was unexpected," she said, setting 1 cup on Marcus's desk. "Think he'll actually do anything with those reports?" Marcus shrugged. "Maybe. Maybe not. But he can't claim ignorance anymore. None of them can." The coffee was hot and strong, exactly how Marcus preferred it. The familiar taste grounded him, a small comfort in a week of upheavals. Outside his window, the warehouse continued its rhythmic activity, packages sorted, trucks loaded, life moving forward. "Lydia called while you were with Wells," Margaret mentioned, sipping her own coffee. "She said to tell you she's filed the incorporation paperwork for the Richardson Logistics Driver Education Fund. The board meets next month to review scholarship applications." Marcus felt a surge of pride. The fund had been Lydia's idea, using a percentage of company profits to help drivers earn commercial licenses and eventually start their own businesses. A way to create opportunity, to extend the ladder downward as others had once done for him. "Tell her thank you," he said simply. Margaret nodded, understanding the deeper gratitude behind the words. She had been with the company long enough to know its heart, to recognize that this week's battles were part of a longer war, not against individuals like Simon Wells, but against the systems that created them. "One more thing," she added, reaching into her pocket and removing a small envelope. "This came for you personally. Hand-delivered." The envelope was cream-colored, expensive stationery. Marcus's name was written on the front in careful cursive. Inside was a child's drawing, a delivery truck colored in bright blue, a stick figure standing beside it wearing what appeared to be a crown. At the bottom, in wobbly letters, "Thank you for being kind. From Ethan, age 8. Marcus stared at the drawing, something tightening in his chest. He thought of all the times he'd considered giving up, selling the business, taking the easier path. Of all the slights he'd endured, the doors closed in his face, the contracts denied for reasons never quite articulated. And now this, a child's drawing, a simple acknowledgement of kindness. Perhaps this was the true measure of success. Not contracts or revenues or warehouses, but the impression left on a young heart. "We're making the right moves," Marcus said, carefully returning the drawing to its envelope. "Even when they're the hard ones. If you've ever received unexpected kindness that renewed your faith in humanity, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe. These small moments of connection remind us why stories like this matter." Friday dawned with a strange sense of anticipation. 1 week since the Oak Ridge incident, though it felt like months had passed. Marcus woke early, the first light of day barely filtering through his bedroom blinds. For the first time in days, he didn't immediately reach for his phone to check emails or messages. Instead, he lay still, listening to the gentle chorus of morning birds outside his window. His house was silent in the way only a home that once held a family can be, the quiet amplifying memories of busier, louder times. Diane's voice calling the kids for breakfast. The thundering footsteps of teenagers rushing downstairs. Laughter around the dinner table. Now it was just him and the echoes, a reality he had gradually come to accept if never quite embrace. The morning routine was familiar. Coffee brewed strong and black, toast with peanut butter, a quick scan of the news on his tablet. Small rituals that anchored his days. But today felt different, as if standing on the edge of something new. His phone rang as he was rinsing his coffee cup. Lydia's name flashed on the screen. "Dad, are you sitting down?" Her voice vibrated with barely contained excitement. "I can be." "What's happening?" The Regional Business Alliance called. "They want you to be the keynote speaker at next month's leadership conference. Theme is Building Ethical Business Practices in a Changing South. Dr. Williams nominated you." Marcus leaned against the kitchen counter, absorbing the news. The conference was a major event, attended by business leaders from across the Southeast. Being invited to keynote was an honor typically reserved for corporate executives or political figures. "They want me to talk about what happened at Oak Ridge," he guessed. "Not exactly," Lydia replied. "They want you to talk about what you've built despite places like Oak Ridge. Your mentorship program. The Driver Education Fund. The whole Richardson Logistics approach to community business." The invitation represented something Marcus had long sought but rarely received. Recognition not just of his struggles, but of his successes. Not just of the barriers he'd faced, but of the paths he'd created. "Tell them yes," he said after a moment. "But I have one condition." "Of course you do," Lydia laughed. "What is it?" "I want to bring some of our drivers. Not just as attendees. As participants in the discussion. Real voices sharing real experiences." The request was unconventional, potentially uncomfortable for an audience accustomed to polished corporate presentations. But that was precisely the point. "I'll make it happen," Lydia promised. As Marcus drove to the office, the familiar Georgia landscape seemed somehow brighter, more vivid. The spring colors more intense, the morning light more golden. He rolled down his window, letting in the scent of magnolias and freshly cut grass. The warehouse was bustling with Friday activity, end-of-week deliveries being processed, weekend schedules confirmed. Marcus moved through the space, greeting employees by name, asking about families, sharing small jokes. These connections, built over years of working side by side, were the true foundation of his company. In his office, a stack of messages awaited, most routine, but one marked urgent. The Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association was requesting a meeting with him personally. Today, if possible. Marcus studied the message, weighing his options. Part of him wanted to decline on principle, to let them stew in their delivery disruptions and social discomfort. But a wiser part recognized the opportunity in their request. Not for reconciliation necessarily, but for clarity. For truth spoken directly to power. He asked Margaret to arrange the meeting for that afternoon. At 2 o'clock, Marcus pulled into the Oak Ridge Estates Community Center parking lot. The building was impressive. Georgian architecture, manicured grounds, a fountain bubbling peacefully in the circular drive. All the trappings of prosperity and tradition. Inside, the committee waited around a large oak table. James Collins, Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Peterson, and several others Marcus recognized from previous deliveries. Also present was Dr. Williams, her calm presence a welcome sight, and Martha Jenkins, the elderly woman who had spoken up at the homeowners meeting. James Collins rose as Marcus entered, extending his hand with forced cordiality. "Mr. Richardson, thank you for coming on such short notice." Marcus shook the offered hand briefly but firmly. "My time is valuable, Mr. Collins. Let's get to the point of this meeting." Of course." Collins gestured to a chair at the head of the table, a position of respect, Marcus noted. "A small but telling change. We've drafted a formal apology for the unfortunate incident last week. We'd like your input before we finalize it." Mrs. Thompson slid a document across the table. Marcus picked it up, scanning the carefully worded paragraphs of corporate-style regret. The language was polished, precise, and utterly soulless. It expressed regret for any misunderstanding or discomfort experienced and promised continued commitment to community values. Marcus set the paper down. "This isn't an apology. This is damage control." "Now see here," Mr. Peterson began, but Collins raised a hand, silencing him. "What would you consider an adequate apology, Mr. Richardson?" Collins asked, his tone carefully neutral. Marcus looked around the table, meeting each person's gaze directly. An adequate apology acknowledges specific actions and their impact. It doesn't hide behind phrases like "any discomfort experienced," as if the problem was in the perception rather than the behavior. He pointed to specific paragraphs in the document. "This mentions misunderstandings, but not the recording of my driver without consent. It refers to maintaining community standards, but not to the racial undertones of the comments made. It promises to move forward in harmony, but offers no concrete steps for change." The room fell silent. Several committee members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "What exactly do you want from us, Mr. Richardson?" Mrs. Thompson finally asked, an edge of defiance still present in her voice. "I want honesty," Marcus replied simply. "I want recognition that what happened wasn't a misunderstanding but a manifestation of deeper assumptions and prejudices. And I want actions, not just words." "Such as?" Collins prompted. "Such as bias training for all residents. Such as a clear code of conduct for how service providers are treated within the community. Such as consequences for those who violate that code." Mr. Peterson scoffed. "That's unreasonable. We can't control how every resident behaves." "Actually, you can," Dr. Williams interjected smoothly. The Homeowners Association bylaws already include provisions for community standards and behavioral expectations. They're typically enforced for things like lawn maintenance and holiday decorations. They could just as easily be applied to treatment of service personnel. The logic was irrefutable, and Peterson fell silent. "There's something else," Martha Jenkins spoke up, her voice soft but clear. "Something more important than policies and training." All eyes turned to her. "We need to acknowledge the harm done. Not just to your driver, Mr. Richardson, but to our community's soul. When we treat people as less than, we become less than ourselves." Her words, simple yet profound, settled over the room like a gentle rain, washing away pretenses. "I have a grandson," she continued. "He's 8 years old. He saw what happened that day. He asked me why the men were being mean to the nice delivery man." Her voice trembled slightly. "What kind of legacy are we creating when children can see the wrongness of our actions more clearly than we can?" The mention of her grandson struck a chord with several committee members. Nods of recognition, glances exchanged, a shifting in seats, small physical manifestations of internal reckonings. James Collins cleared his throat. "I believe Mrs. Jenkins makes an excellent point. Perhaps we should redraft this apology to better reflect the reality of what occurred. It wasn't a full surrender, but it was movement. Progress measured in inches rather than miles, but progress nonetheless." "I have a suggestion," Dr. Williams offered. "Why don't we ask Mr. Richardson what a renewed relationship would look like? What conditions would need to be met for Richardson Logistics to consider serving Oak Ridge Estates again?" All eyes turned to Marcus, awaiting his answer. The power dynamic had shifted subtly. They needed him now more than he needed them. It was an unfamiliar position of leverage, one he intended to use responsibly. "3 conditions," he said after a moment's consideration. "First, a genuine apology, publicly delivered to the driver who was harassed. Second, implementation of the bias training and code of conduct we discussed. And third," he paused, making eye contact with Martha Jenkins, "a community partnership with the Richardson Logistics Driver Education Fund. I want Oak Ridge Estates to sponsor 2 scholarships annually for aspiring logistics entrepreneurs from underserved communities." The third condition clearly surprised them. It wasn't punitive but constructive, focused on building rather than penalizing. It offered a path to genuine redemption rather than mere reputation management. "That's unexpected," Collins admitted. "Change usually is," Marcus replied. As the meeting concluded, commitments were made, next steps outlined, tentative bridges constructed. Nothing was resolved completely. Real change never happened in a single meeting, but the foundation had been laid. Outside in the parking lot, Dr. Williams caught up with Marcus as he was about to enter his car. "That was well played," she said, genuine admiration in her voice. "Especially the scholarship requirement. It transforms their guilt into something productive." Marcus smiled slightly. "Guilt is a temporary motivator. Pride in doing good lasts longer. A philosophy that served you well, it seems." She glanced back at the community center. "They'll agree to your terms. Not because they've all had moral epiphanies, but because the alternatives are worse. Still, some of them might actually learn something in the process." "Some is better than none," Marcus observed. "Progress is rarely universal." He extended his hand, which she shook warmly. "Thank you for your advocacy, Dr. Williams. It made a difference. Eleanor, please. And you're welcome. Though I suspect you would have found your way to this outcome regardless. You strike me as someone who's navigated difficult waters before." "All my life," Marcus acknowledged. "But it helps to have allies along the shore." As he drove away from Oak Ridge Estates, Marcus felt neither triumph nor vindication. Those were simpler, less nuanced emotions than the moment warranted. What he felt instead was a quiet affirmation of his life's work. Not just the business he'd built, but the values he'd maintained while building it. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the road, the day beginning its gentle transition toward evening. Marcus rolled down his window again, letting in the sweet spring air. In the distance, dogwood trees bloomed white against the deepening blue sky, their blossoms catching the golden light. 1 week had changed so much, and so little. The world was still the world, with all its imperfections and possibilities. But perhaps, in one small corner of it, something important had shifted. Perhaps that was enough for now. Have you ever transformed a negative experience into an opportunity for positive change? What approach worked for you? Share your story in the comments below. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. The Richardson Logistics Driver Education Fund officially launched with an inaugural class of 10 scholarship recipients. National Parcel Services implemented new diversity supplier guidelines across all regional offices. The Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association, true to their word, established a Community Service Provider Code of Conduct, complete with reporting mechanisms and accountability measures. Small victories, perhaps, in the grand scheme of things, but meaningful ones. On a warm Saturday in late April, Marcus found himself back at Oak Ridge Estates, not for a meeting or negotiation, but as an invited guest at their Spring Community Festival. The event had been expanded this year to include service providers and community partners, a direct result of the changes set in motion weeks earlier. The community center grounds had been transformed with white tents, colorful banners, and rows of tables showcasing local businesses and organizations. Children raced across the manicured lawn, their laughter carrying on the gentle breeze. Adults mingled in small groups, the usual social hierarchies temporarily suspended in the festival atmosphere. Marcus moved through the crowd, exchanging greetings and handshakes. Some residents were genuinely welcoming, others politely distant. Real change took time, longer than a few weeks, certainly. But the fact that he was here at all, invited and acknowledged, represented a shift that once would have seemed impossible. "Mr. Richardson," a small voice called out. Marcus turned to see a young boy racing toward him, a woman following at a more dignified pace. The boy skidded to a stop before him, slightly out of breath. "Remember me? I'm Ethan. I drew you the picture." Marcus smiled, recognition dawning. "Of course I remember. The delivery truck with the crown. It's hanging in my office." Ethan beamed, clearly delighted by this information. "Grandma said you might be here today. I wanted to see you again." He turned, pointing to the woman who had caught up to them. "This is my grandma." Martha Jenkins extended her hand. "We meet again, Mr. Richardson. Though under happier circumstances this time." "Marcus, please," he replied, shaking her hand warmly. "Marcus." She nodded. "Ethan hasn't stopped talking about your delivery trucks since that day. He's quite determined to be a driver when he grows up." "Is that so?" Marcus knelt to the boy's level. "It's important work, you know. Connecting people, bringing them what they need." Ethan nodded seriously. "Grandma says it's about dignity." "Dignity," Martha corrected gently. "That's right," Marcus agreed. "Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, no matter what job they do." "Even when they make mistakes?" Ethan asked, a child's innate understanding of justice seeking confirmation. "Especially then," Marcus said. "That's when dignity matters most." Ethan considered this, his small face thoughtful. Then, with the sudden energy of childhood, he was racing off again, distracted by a new attraction. "He absorbs everything," Martha observed, watching him go. "I worry sometimes about what he's learning from the world. From us." "He seems to be learning the right things from you," Marcus assured her. Martha's eyes, faded with age but still bright with intelligence, studied him carefully. "You know, when I was a girl, my father worked as a janitor at the local high school. Every day, he put on his uniform with the same care others might give to a business suit. 'Dignity isn't given,' he used to say. It's claimed." "A wise man," Marcus said. "Yes, he was. Though I think now perhaps he was only partly right. Dignity must be claimed, yes. But it must also be recognized. Respected." She gestured to the festival around them. "This is a small step in that direction. Not the end of the journey, certainly, but movement nonetheless." Their conversation was interrupted by James Collins, appearing with a slightly harried look of an event organizer. "Mr. Richardson, we're about to begin the community recognition ceremony. We'd be honored if you'd join us on the stage." The stage was a small raised platform beneath the largest tent, decorated with spring flowers and a banner reading Oak Ridge Estates Community Partnership Celebration. A modest crowd had gathered, mostly residents but also some visitors from neighboring communities. Collins took the microphone, welcoming everyone and launching into a speech about community values and moving forward together. The language was still somewhat stilted, corporate in its careful phrasing, but the intent behind it seemed genuine enough. "And now," Collins continued, "I'd like to invite Dr. Eleanor Williams to say a few words about our new Community Service Provider Initiative." Dr. Williams took the microphone with the confidence of someone accustomed to addressing large groups. "Thank you, James. As a relative newcomer to Oak Ridge Estates, I've been impressed by the community's willingness to examine its practices and make meaningful changes. The Service Provider Initiative isn't just about policies and procedures, though those are important. It's about recognizing the humanity in every interaction, the dignity in every exchange." She went on to outline the specifics of the initiative, the code of conduct, the reporting mechanisms, the accountability measures. But more importantly, she spoke about the philosophy behind it, the understanding that communities were defined not by their amenities or property values, but by how they treated those who served them. "And so," she concluded, "it is my great pleasure to announce the first 2 recipients of the Oak Ridge Estates Service Excellence Scholarships, to be awarded through the Richardson Logistics Driver Education Fund." A young woman and a middle-aged man joined her on stage. Maria Delgado, a single mother working as a warehouse associate while studying logistics management, and James Washington, a veteran transitioning to civilian employment after 15 years of military service. As Dr. Williams told their stories, Marcus watched the faces in the crowd. There was genuine interest, even inspiration. Connections being made that transcended the usual boundaries of class and circumstance. When he was finally called to the microphone, Marcus spoke briefly and from the heart. Not about the incident that had precipitated these changes, but about the future they were building together. About dignity freely given and rightfully claimed. About communities that recognized their interdependence rather than reinforcing their divisions. "Delivery isn't just about packages," he concluded. "It's about connection. Every day, my drivers connect people to what they need, to what they want, to what matters to them. Today, Oak Ridge Estates is making a different kind of delivery, delivering on the promise of respect and recognition for all who contribute to this community. That's a package worth receiving." The applause was warm, if not thunderous. Real change wasn't marked by dramatic gestures or passionate declarations, but by small, consistent shifts in perception and behavior. By new pathways created where barriers once stood. After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed to enjoy the festival's other offerings, Jamal approached Marcus. As the driver who had recorded the original incident, he had been invited to today's event but had remained quietly in the background until now. "So this is it?" he asked, gesturing around them. "This makes everything okay?" Marcus recognized the skepticism in the younger man's voice. He had felt it himself, many times throughout his life. "Not everything," he acknowledged. "Not immediately. Maybe not ever completely. But it's progress, Jamal. And progress doesn't happen without witnesses. Without evidence. Without people willing to document the truth." Jamal considered this, his expression softening slightly. "I didn't think anything would come of that video, you know. I just couldn't stand by and do nothing." "Sometimes that's all it takes," Marcus said. "The refusal to do nothing. To be silent. To accept what shouldn't be accepted." As the afternoon sun began its descent, casting long golden shadows across the festival grounds, Marcus took a moment to step away from the activity. Finding a quiet spot beneath a spreading oak tree, he pulled out his phone and dialed a familiar number. "Dad." Lydia answered on the second ring. "How's the festival?" "Surreal," he admitted. "But in a good way, I think. Real change happening in real time." "I wish Mom could see it," Lydia said softly. "She can," Marcus replied, looking up through the oak's branches to the clear blue sky beyond. "She always believed this day would come. That people could be better if given the chance. That dignity would prevail if we insisted on it. She was right." "She usually was," Marcus smiled, the familiar ache of Diane's absence tempered by the certainty of her continued influence in his life. In the choices he made, the values he upheld, the legacy he built. As he rejoined the festival, Marcus was approached by one final person, Mr. Peterson, the resident who had been most vocal during the original incident. The man looked uncomfortable, out of place in his own community event. "Richardson," he began awkwardly. "I wanted to say, that is." He trailed off, the words seemingly stuck in his throat. Marcus waited, neither helping nor hindering the man's struggle. "I was wrong," Peterson finally managed. "What I did, what I said that day. It was wrong. I've been thinking about it a lot. About why I did it." He looked around, making sure no one else was within earshot. "The truth is, I think I was jealous. You pulled up in that truck, and I saw the company name matched your name, and I don't know. It made me feel small somehow. Like I'd missed something important." The confession was unexpected, its rawness catching Marcus off guard. "Anyway," Peterson continued, "I'm sorry. Really sorry. Not just because of the consequences, but because it was wrong. Plain and simple. The apology wasn't perfect. It still contained traces of self-justification, of psychological framing that softened the offense. But it was genuine, a human acknowledgement of human failing." "Apology accepted," Marcus said simply, extending his hand. As they shook hands, briefly, formally, but sincerely, Marcus thought about the long journey that had brought him to this moment. The sacrifices made, the indignities endured, the battles fought and sometimes lost. All of it leading here, to this imperfect but meaningful reconciliation. The festival continued around them, life moving forward in its messy, complicated way. Children played, adults conversed, connections formed and reformed. A community in the process of redefining itself, one interaction at a time. Marcus knew that the work wasn't finished. Change never was. There would be backsliding and resistance, old habits reasserting themselves when attention wavered. But something fundamental had shifted, in Oak Ridge Estates and beyond. A door had been opened that could never be completely closed again. As the day drew to a close, Marcus found himself standing once more with Dr. Williams and Martha Jenkins, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. "Was it worth it?" Dr. Williams asked quietly. "All of this, from that one moment of confrontation?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "It wasn't really about that one moment," he said finally. "It was about all the moments that came before it, and all the ones that will come after. About claiming space for dignity in a world that often denies it. And building something that lasts beyond ourselves," Martha added, watching her grandson play in the distance. "Yes," Marcus agreed. "Exactly that. If this story of dignity, courage, and transformation has touched you, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Your support helps ensure that stories like this one continue to be told and heard." 3 months later, on a brilliantly clear summer morning, Marcus stood before a packed auditorium at the Regional Business Alliance Leadership Conference. Business leaders from across the Southeast filled the seats, alongside community organizers, educators, and policymakers. In the front row sat his family, Lydia and her husband, his son David and his partner, his youngest daughter Sophia home from graduate school. Pride shone in their eyes, reflecting back his own. Behind them sat the Richardson Logistics team, Margaret, Carlos, Jamal, and a dozen others who had chosen to attend. And scattered throughout the audience were faces from Oak Ridge Estates, Dr. Williams, Martha Jenkins and her grandson Ethan, even James Collins and his committee members. "Leadership," Marcus began, his voice steady and clear, "is not defined by titles or authority. It's defined by the courage to stand where others sit. To speak when others are silent. To build bridges where others construct barriers." He shared the story of what had happened at Oak Ridge Estates, not as a tale of personal vindication, but as a case study in community transformation. He spoke about the Richardson Logistics Driver Education Fund and its growing impact. About the ripple effects of one confrontation that led to policy changes across multiple organizations. But mostly, he spoke about dignity, its personal nature, its universal significance, its transformative power when recognized and respected. "My father was a school janitor," he told the audience. "He kept the floors so clean you could see your reflection in them. He knew every student's name, noticed when they were struggling, celebrated when they succeeded. Most of the teachers treated him as invisible. But the students saw him. Really saw him." Marcus paused, remembering. On the day he retired after 30 years, those students filled the gymnasium. Teachers wondered why. Students knew. They understood that dignity isn't determined by your job title or salary. It's determined by how you treat others, and how you demand to be treated in return. The auditorium was silent, hundreds of people leaning slightly forward in their seats, connected by the universal truth of his words. My company doesn't just deliver packages, Marcus continued. We deliver dignity. To our employees through fair wages and growth opportunities. To our customers through reliable service and personal connection. And to our communities through partnership and mutual respect. He gestured to the Richardson Logistics team members in the audience. These are not just my employees. They are my partners in building something that matters, something that lasts beyond quarterly reports or annual revenues. They are dignity deliverers, every one of them. As he concluded his speech, the applause was immediate and sustained. People rose to their feet, not out of ritual politeness but genuine recognition. Recognition of a truth powerfully spoken, a vision clearly articulated, a path forward plainly marked. Afterward, as Marcus moved through the crowd accepting congratulations and fielding questions, he found himself approached by an elderly man he didn't recognize. Distinguished in appearance, with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, the man waited patiently until there was a break in the conversations. Mr. Richardson, he said, extending his hand. William Barrett. I was deeply moved by your address today. Marcus shook his hand, trying to place the name. It sounded vaguely familiar. I'm the CEO of Eastern Regional Bank, Barrett explained. We've been looking to diversify our vendor relationships, particularly in logistics and delivery services. Your company's approach to business ethics and community engagement is exactly what we've been seeking. The opportunity was significant. Eastern Regional was one of the largest financial institutions in the Southeast, with hundreds of branches that required regular courier services. I'd be happy to discuss possibilities, Marcus replied, maintaining his professional composure despite the excitement building within him. Excellent. My assistant will be in touch to arrange a meeting. Barrett paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. There's something else. Something personal. My father was also a janitor at Eastern Regional's first headquarters building. Your words about dignity, about being seen, they resonated deeply. The connection formed instantly, an understanding that transcended business transactions and entered the realm of shared human experience. Two sons of janitors, standing as equals in a world that had once deemed their fathers invisible. I look forward to working together, Marcus said, meaning it in ways that extended beyond contracts and services. As the conference concluded and attendees began filtering out of the venue, Marcus found a quiet moment with his family. They surrounded him with hugs and congratulations, their pride a tangible force he could almost touch. Mom would have loved this, Lydia said, echoing her words from months earlier. She helped make it happen, Marcus replied. Everything I've built, we built together. She just isn't here to see the harvest. His son David, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. You know, I've been thinking about joining the company. Not just because it's family, but because I believe in what you're building. What it stands for. The offer caught Marcus by surprise. David had pursued a different path, working in environmental science for a state agency. That he would consider changing course was unexpected but deeply moving. The company will always have a place for you, Marcus assured him. But only if it's truly what you want, not what you think I want. I know, David smiled. That's why I'm considering it. Because it would be my choice, not my obligation. As they walked together toward the exit, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From the son of a janitor to a delivery driver to a business owner to a keynote speaker. Each step marked by challenges, each challenge met with determination, each determination fueled by the unwavering belief in his own inherent dignity and the dignity of others. Outside, the summer sun shone brilliantly in a cloudless sky. The air was warm but not oppressive, carrying the scent of magnolias and possibility. Marcus looked around at the family and team members gathered nearby, at the business leaders and community members still engaged in conversation, at the world continuing its ceaseless movement forward. In that moment, he felt something rare and precious, the sense that he was exactly where he was meant to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do. Not because fate had decreed it, but because he had claimed it, had insisted upon it, had delivered it to himself and to others with the same care he had always given to packages entrusted to his hands. Dignity. Delivered. If this story has inspired you or touched your heart, please take a moment to like and subscribe. There's more to come, and I'd love to continue sharing these journeys with you. And if you've been moved by the power of dignity in your own life, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. You know, we all face moments when we must decide whether to stand up for our dignity or let it slide. It's never an easy choice. But as you've seen in this story, sometimes the hardest stand creates the most powerful ripple effects. Before you go, click on the video appearing on your screen now for an even more powerful tale of courage that will leave you inspired and ready to face your own challenges with renewed strength.